I'm standing here in a minefield on Israel's Golan Heights right along the border with Syria. Now, a lot of these mines are left over from the 1967 and 1973 wars between Israel and Syria, but today, Syria is one big minefield. We're taking you there today on The Watchman, only on TBN. Stick around. Welcome to The Watchman, and welcome to a war zone, one of the hottest war zones in the world. I'm standing in the Israeli part of the Golan Heights. Over my shoulder is Syria, the scene of the Syrian civil war, which over the past 5 years, folks, we've seen some 300,000 people killed there as ISIS and Al-Qaeda battle Iran, Hezbollah, the Assad regime. Basically, right on Israel's border here on the Golan Heights, we have the intersection of all the world's worst actors, whether it's ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Iran, Hezbollah, Russia. Vladimir Putin's regime is involved here in Syria, carrying out airstrikes. It's all going down here. It's a scene of an earth-shaking series of events that's completely reshaping the Middle East. And guess what, folks? Again, this is all unfolding on Israel's border. Israel is literally the first line of defense for Western civilization. Israel is the canary in the coal mine, and if Israel goes down, we all go down. Not only does Israel have Syria on its border, the Syrian civil war, ISIS, Hezbollah, Iran, etc., but in Gaza, Israel's facing Hamas, ISIS, Palestinian Islamic Jihad. In Sinai, we have ISIS. So Israel, a state the size of New Jersey, folks, is surrounded by very, very bloody borders. And today we will show you how the Syrian civil war, and I can hear explosions behind me right now going on in Syria. We will show you how what's going on over here in Syria matters to you over there, whether you're living in America or Europe or elsewhere, because the chaos in Syria is spilling over and reaching all across the world now. Look no further than Paris, France, where in November we had fighters from ISIS who had fought with ISIS here in Syria returned to France, carried out a horrific terror attack. We have a pipeline right now going from Syria to the west, where you have jihadi fighters with very bad intentions who are coming to Europe, coming to the United States, and seeking to do a lot of damage, and it all begins right here in Syria. So today we're going to dig deep into the Syrian civil war and what's going on along Israel's northern border, how it profoundly affects not only the state of Israel, but affects you sitting there at home, no matter where you are. This is one of the hottest spots in the world. We're going to take you there today with one of the world's leading intelligence and Middle East experts, Avi Melamed, right here on The Watchman, only with Kufi and only on TBN. Let's go to work. It's the world's most brutal and complicated conflict and a massive humanitarian disaster. Over the past 5 years, the Syrian civil war has left millions of people displaced and hundreds of thousands more dead. Aided by Russia, Iran, and the terror group Hezbollah, the regime of Bashar al-Assad clings to power. Yet ISIS still controls large parts of the country, and other terror groups continue to wreak havoc here as well. Amid all the bloodshed, world powers are pushing to establish a truce.
We need to stop the cycle of fighting and of bloodshed that is destroying Syria.
But that has proven easier said than done. Despite all the diplomatic efforts, the violence continues and is moving ever closer to Syria's border with Israel, as Iran, ISIS, and their proxies seek to establish terror bases on the Golan Heights. The Golan is all that separates Israel from the terrorist hordes that are rampaging right next door in Syria.
A couple of miles to the east, we have hundreds, if not thousands, of Islamist radical affiliated militants that are fighting mostly either one against the other, or the Syrians and the Iranians that are also located a couple of miles away from here.
Avi Melamed is a former Israeli intelligence official and author of the new book, Inside the Middle East. He joins us today on the Syrian border, on the Israeli side of the Golan Heights, to break down the world's bloodiest conflict and what it means for Israel and America.
We are looking right now, folks, at a war zone. One of the hottest, most violent, most brutal war zones in the world right now. The Syrian civil war is unfolding right over the ridge here from where we're standing on the Israeli side of the Golan border. This has been deserted, this town, basically, as a result of the Syrian civil war. But you had major Al-Qaeda activity here, obviously. What else do we see? I mean, you can hear the booms.
Correct.
You can see plumes of smoke. So what kind of activity is going on along here right now?
What you see, there are different Syrian communities scattered all in front of us. You could see some of them are very large in a town size. Actually, the town that you see over there, it's called Khan el-Arnabe. That town sits on the road that leads straight from here, from Quneitra, all the way up to Damascus, which is about 35 kilometers from here.
Yeah, we're not far from the Syrian capital. I mean, as Avi said, a stone's throw really from Damascus, which is also obviously a scene of some heavy fighting in and around Damascus.
Correct. And another significant thing that we see in this region is that when you look, you see the line of the hills, the volcanic hills that are actually dominating this whole region. Yeah. So whoever dominates those hills obviously enjoy a military strategic edge. Those hills are the epicenter of a constant fights going on between Assad forces backed by Iranian militias against Syrian rebels, and the Syrian rebels are divided into different groups. You have Al-Qaeda scattered here, you have Islamist affiliated Syrian groups, you have Free Syrian Army, you have ISIS people that are located not so far from here. There was a time there used to be much bigger presence of ISIS in this region. They have been pushed away from this region further down to the east. Obviously, we all understand that we are now in the midst of this enormously changing region which has a tectonic plate movement. Oh, yeah. You just very accurately described. And by the way, Eric, I want to show you, and maybe we could show the viewers.
Yeah.
You said so accurately before when you were talking about the challenges of the Middle East. When you look today, when you talk about the war in Syria, and you made a very, very accurate observation. And the observation that you made was, this is no longer a Syrian civil war. This is an open Sunni, Shiite, and Iranian Arab collision stage. Right now, what we are looking at, Eric, is one stage out of 8 active stages right now in the Middle East in a different level of intensity. This one is one of the highest one, where you could see this Iranian Arab power struggle coming into effect. So when you talk about it, you are looking at an area that Israel is located right in the midst of this huge power struggle. But when you look at
in
the
a sea of madness.
In the sea of madness, and when you look at the potential ramifications, this is mind-blowing because as of now, relatively speaking, Israel, as of now, relatively speaking, is left intact. But that could change the next day.
It could. Avi, I have a few takeaways here as you so expertly unpack the Middle East for us. Number one, it seems like we hear a lot about Israel, obviously, and against its enemies. It seems like the main struggle going on in the region right now is between Sunni and Shia.
Correct.
And they are at each other's throats. You have Iran on the march, Iran and its proxies on the march on one end. You have ISIS on the march. You have the Saudis trying to maintain and be strong. So that seems like the main struggle. The other thing that jumps out at me and is glaringly apparent, especially after you broke it down the map there, Avi, and just standing here, is that Israel is truly, truly the first line of defense for Western civilization and the last line of defense for Western civilization. Folks, if Israel goes down, we all go down. Israel is all that's holding back the barbarians at the gates. Quite literally, we are standing at the gates right now, folks, here on the Golan Heights, and the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, are literally the only thing holding back the floodgates of jihad from reaching the shores of the West in a major way.
And you know, Eric, to to expand the picture, I always like to give the following illustration, saying, imagine that you are now sitting in the middle of the Yellowstone and it is erupting, and you are having coffee and everything is fine with you. But you are sitting in the middle of the Yellowstone and it's erupting. So basically, in a way, it's kind of like illustration of what we see all around us. And as you very accurately pointed out, what we see today, the big game is the Iranian-Arab power struggle. The big game is the Sunni Shiite Arab power struggle. Israel is located in the midst of this huge tectonic plate move, and as of now, it's a miracle to see how much Israel was left intact. That could change the next morning, so we have to take it into consideration.
Any day. I mean, as you said, a few years ago, obviously, we were driving up here in the Golan. It's more fortified now in some areas, obviously, on the Israeli side, because you have hell on earth unfolding across the border in Syria. But things are changing so rapidly. Even Avi, I just look at Egypt, 2 massive revolutions in the span of a few years. The Middle East, expect the unexpected in the Middle East. Oh, and by the way, Russia, a massive nuclear power, a former superpower, is now involved in the Syrian civil war. Turkey, which is a powerful player, a NATO member in its own right, also carrying out airstrikes in Syria. It's all unfolding right before you, folks. And Israel, as Avi said, Israel is strong, but man, what a precarious position for a tiny nation to be in, surrounded by the wolves of jihad and folks, bad actors with bad intentions who are not fans of Israel and the Jewish people, to say the least. Folks, don't go anywhere. We have much more coming up from here on the Syrian border, on the edge of the world's bloodiest conflict. It's the Watchman. It's Kufi, only on TBN.
We see it all over the internet, newspapers, and television as terror groups like ISIS, Hezbollah, and Hamas terrorize Israel. Each year, the threat increases and intensifies. Will you pray for Israel? Will you confront government officials on behalf of Israel and the Jewish people? How will you answer God if you choose to do nothing?
To see evil and not call it evil is evil. Not to speak is to speak. Not to act is to act. God will not hold us harmless. Stand up and speak up and do it now.
Join Kufi, where 2.5 million Christians across the U.S. are working together to defend Israel in our classrooms, churches, and communities. They have an active presence in over 300 college campuses and mobilize their members to communicate pro-Israel perspectives to elected officials. Visit our website, cufi.org.
And welcome back to the Watchman. If we can look over here, we have a UN post here. Avi, tell us why the UN is here, the United Nations is here on the Golan Heights.
The UN staff that you see here is part of a UN observation force that was deployed in the Golan Heights following the 1973 war between Israel and Syria. It's part of the Israeli-Syrian ceasefire agreement. Normally, these two people wouldn't be here. They would have been inside Syria or in other posts located along the Syrian-Israeli ceasefire line. The reasons they are here is because it's too dangerous for them now to be in Syria. Because the war is raging in Syria, so they have been relocated. They have been moved from their positions, relocated right here so they could continue cover on what's going on in the Syrian arena. One other thing, Erick, very important to mention following what you say. We are talking about a state that became devastated by a brutal war. So we are talking about hundreds of thousands of civilians killed.
Yeah. What is the count now? It's over 200,000, I believe, in Syria?
The count now is more than 250,000. It's clearly getting to the 300,000.
In 5 years.
Just
under 5 years, about 5 years. Close to 300,000 people killed in only 5 years as part of the Syrian civil war, just over the horizon here.
And roughly speaking, we are looking
this is hell on earth.
50 to 60% of the people killed are civilians. We are talking about
women, children.
15,000 kids at least. We are talking about thousands and thousands of civilians. Let us not forget the humanitarian suffering and the crisis, and let us not forget the huge convoys of Syrian refugees. We are talking about, believe it or not, Syria used to be 22 million people state nation. Today, according to the figures, about 50% of the Syrians, we are talking 11 to 12 million people, became either dislocated inside Syria or refugees outside of Syria. You are looking at one of the most dramatic events in the history of the Middle East, and the ramifications of this event exceeds the border of the Middle East.
That's a huge statement, Avi. For someone, an authority like Avi, to say that this is one of the most dramatic occurrences in the history of the Middle East, that tells you what's going on right now in Syria is a big deal. Obviously, we have hundreds of thousands, 600,000 Syrian refugees have flooded over the border nearby to where we're standing right now, into Jordan. But of course, in the West, we have this refugee crisis where the Syrian civil war, why should you care at home if you're sitting, say, in America or Western Europe? Why should you care about what's happening over there in Syria? Well, it is reaching our shores, not only in the form of jihadists fighting with ISIS, returning from Syria to places like Paris and carrying out horrific attacks there, but the refugee crisis has reached our shores. Thousands and thousands of Syrian refugees fleeing this conflict. So if you think we're sitting very comfortably in America, if you think what happens over here in the Middle East does not affect you in Wisconsin or Iowa or California, think again.
Correct, Eric. And again, when you look at the map and you look at the wide picture, you could see Syria, you could see Turkey, you could see the passage to Europe.
Yeah.
And you have very accurately described one of the major outcomes of the war in Syria, the huge influx of Syrians fleeing to Europe.
This is it.
Now, many of these people fleeing to Europe are just innocent people
Sure.
that are fleeing to Europe,
Sure.
trying to escape hell.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously, you also know that some of them are not
Yeah.
so innocent.
Some of the Paris attackers, we saw a horrific terror attack in Paris, November 2015. Some of them had fought with ISIS in Syria and slipped in among the refugees into Europe. So it's a very complex situation. As Avi mentioned, you have innocent women and children who are legitimately fleeing a horrific war zone in Syria, but unfortunately you have bad actors from organizations like ISIS that can take advantage of this refugee crisis to strike in the West. Very complicated, complex issue, but it shows you again how this conflict in Syria and the madness, the chaos, 300,000 killed, has spilled over and become a global problem, and none more so for then the country I'm standing in right now along the Syrian border, Israel. So Avi, thank you so much, my friend.
Thank
A
you,
way
Eric.
to break down probably the most hellish conflict on earth right now, the Syrian civil war. And now, folks, thanks to our good friend Avi, you have a picture of how this affects not only Israel, but America and Europe. This is a global problem here in Syria. Much more coming up from Israel, from the Golan Heights, on the border of a war zone.
Israel's fight is our fight. We are one. We are united. We will not be discouraged. We will not be defeated. We will not be intimidated. We will not sit down. We will not be silent. We are the worst nightmare of the anti-Semites of the world. The victory is going to be ours.
Join the largest pro-Israel organization in the U.S. for the 2016 CUFI Summit in Washington, D.C., July 18th and 19th. You will hear numerous experts and have an opportunity to meet face-to-face with your government representatives and express your support for Israel. Visit our website, cufi.org, and register today for the 2016 CUFI Summit in Washington, D.C.
And welcome back to The Watchman, only on TBN. You know, folks, one of the great untold stories of the Syrian civil war is the role that Israel is playing. Not a military role, but a humanitarian role.
So we sat down with Dr. Tarif Badr, Deputy Surgeon General of the Israeli Defense Forces, to talk about it. Dr. Badr was on a campus tour sponsored by our good friends at Our Soldiers Speak, and he shared with us some of the amazing work Israel is doing along a hostile border.
You cannot stand aside and do nothing when you see children, women, and men, of course, with the severe injuries, hit by their brothers or their neighbors, and you cannot stand aside and do nothing. So actually, the majority of them are severely injured, and we decided to help them. The Syrian people were very afraid of the fact that they are facing the border, the Israeli border, and even they are crossing this border, and they are treated by their enemies. The Syrian people have been taught for tens of years that the worst enemy that they have is the Israeli one. That's the fact, that's the reason that for many months, even after the treatment in Israel, they haven't said the word Israel. They all the time told us that they are going to the West to be treated. So they were very afraid of the fact that they are treated by the Israeli people. But I can tell you that by the time when more and more Syrians decided to go towards the border and to be treated by the Israeli soldiers and civilians, the medical teams, and they were returned back safe to Syria. So I had the opportunity to speak Arabic with them, but the same language. And I heard this from them. They are very thankful for what we are doing as a state of Israel for them. The field hospital was built on more or less March 2013, just after the first 7 Syrians across the border were treated by our teams. The concept of the field hospital is to be there. The proximity is very important, since part of the Syrians were severely injured, and we wanted to be sure that in case there is a need for further treatment, not only the treatment given by the medical teams on the border, the primary cares, we wanted to be sure that in case there is a need for further treatment, we will be there. You have to understand that at the beginning, as I mentioned before, the Syrians were very afraid of going to Israel and be treated by Israel. So building this field hospital just near the border, so we can treat them there, on the border, treat them on this field hospital, save their lives, do whatever is needed, initial treatment, operations, or whatever, and then send them back to Syria. It was the best way to, first of all, to treat them, to save their lives, and to send them back to Syria. We believe in saving lives. We believe in extending helping hand for others. I think the state of Israel had decided a very strategic decision that whenever there is a need for us, we will be there. And I can tell you that these almost 2,000 of Syrians who were treated by the state of Israel feel a little bit different about the state of Israel compared of what they felt before. And I'm sure that more than 1,000 of Haitian people who were treated by our hospital, or more than 1,600 Nepalese people who were treated by our hospital, feel a little bit different about the state of Israel, about the people in Israel, and it's very important. I was born in a small village in the north part of Israel called Khorfesh. I belong to the Druze society, to the Druze community. My dream was to be a physician, and I fulfilled this dream. And since I studied before the graduation, so I went to the military service. And since 1993, I'm an officer in the military service in the IDF Medical Corps, and I'm proud to be now the Deputy Surgeon General, and actually one of the candidates of being the next Surgeon General. I think one of the strengths of the State of Israel is that in my position can be an officer or physician who belongs to a minority in the State of Israel. And I think it's a wonderful thing.
Well, as you can see from what Dr. Bader just shared, Israel truly is a light to the nations. Well, coming up, my final thoughts on why you should care about the Syrian civil war. It's the Watchman. It's Christians United for Israel, only on TBN. Stick around.
We see it all over the internet, newspapers, and television as terror groups like ISIS, Hezbollah, and Hamas terrorize Israel. Each year, the threat increases and intensifies. Will you pray for Israel? Will you confront government officials on behalf of Israel and the Jewish people? How will you answer God if you choose to do nothing?
To see evil and not call it evil is evil. Not to speak is to speak. Not to act is to act. God will not hold us harmless. Stand up and speak up and do it now.
Join CUFI, where 2.5 million Christians across the U.S. are working together to defend Israel in our classrooms, churches, and communities. They have an active presence in over 300 college campuses and mobilize their members to communicate pro-Israel perspectives to elected officials. Visit our website, cufi.org.
And welcome back. You know, folks, it was such an eye-opener to be standing on the Israeli side of the Golan Heights and to hear explosions and the sounds of war in the distance coming from right next door in Syria. It brought home for me, and I hope it brought home for you, just how precarious Israel's position is right now as this tiny nation, the size of New Jersey, is literally surrounded by enemies on all sides. And remember, when it comes to the chaos in Syria, it's not just Israel that's affected. These days, what happens in the Middle East does not stay in the Middle East. From the ongoing Syrian refugee crisis to Europeans and Americans traveling to Syria to join ISIS and then returning home, the Syrian civil war has been a game changer, not just for the Middle East, but for the world. You know, the Bible says, "My people perish for lack of knowledge." And here at Christians United for Israel, we believe that you need to know the truth about these earth-shaking events that touch every one of our lives. I said earlier in the segment with Avi Melamed that Israel is the first line of defense for Western civilization. Amen. So what are you waiting for? Join the movement. Join with us at CUFI as we serve as watchmen and women on the wall each week. And remember, you can only see it right here on TBN, the Trinity Broadcasting Network. So, thanks again for joining us today on the Syrian border. Until next time, God bless you, and remember, never hold your peace.